Once again, Teoscar Hernandez is in the media for talking about his year with the Seattle Mariners in 2023. Joe and I are going to talk about that and what we think that means for the team moving forward. And then we'll talk about the possibility of re-signing Justin Turner and what he just posted on social media. And we'll wrap it all up by talking about the finale of the 2024 World Series between the Dodgers and the Yankees. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 135 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And this is the Jason Voorhees episode of the podcast. And I am here with noted Halloween hater, not dresser-upper guy, Joe Lacey. Joe, how are you?
I'm feeling great, not in some silly costume like yourself. Look at you. Look at you over there. Your hat that doesn't fit, you're blinged out with some fake chains. He took off his earrings, guys, because they hurt. He's so committed to his Halloween bit. That's crazy that he's just going to sit here and project at me. Colton, I'm feeling great. Mainly, again,
I don't care anymore.
I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable in my get-up as it stands right now. Someone who notably wasn't very comfortable in his time with Seattle, Teoscar Hernandez. Transitions they go absolutely crazy.
Wow.
Listen, Teo, we all know it was a down year, and there have been numerous. I mean, this is what, the second, third time, like in the media, just like saying something about his tenure, and whether or not it was a good thing or bad, it's always been like a pretty negative thing, because obviously he had his worst year of his career, and then he kind of signed a prove it deal, a bet on myself kind of contract with the Dodgers for 1 year. There was a very great article laid out. It was by Alden Gonzalez, what you said, right?
Yep. Alden Gonzalez on ESPN.
Yes, on ESPN. It was I just through and through, like a good article from top to bottom. It's just, there's always the one thing that seems to stand out in a lot of these situations, and it's this comment that Teo made about the Seattle Mariners. One thing I know for certain, this offseason, Teo is a free agent, and he will not be signing back with the Seattle Mariners. I'll put my whole paycheck on it. I'll put my entire life savings on it right now, and probably do it with BetOnline. You to BetOnline for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. Postseason baseball, but most importantly, the NFL regular season is here, and BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And if you think that you know your stuff, get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. Head to the website today to get in on the action, and remember, BetOnline, the game starts here. So famously in 2023, Teoscar Hernandez, as we've kind of outlined, had his worst year offensively of his career. Like in a full season, right? Since he kind of burst onto the scene with Toronto in 2021, ever since then, it's been pretty consistent. A 130-ish WRC plus or OPS plus, but with Seattle in 2023, put up a 106 WRC plus with a 258 average, a 305 OBP, a 435 slugging. It was the highest strikeout percentage of his career as far as like post that, coming into his own as an everyday player. And so it begged the question, like, what really happened with Teo in Seattle? And then the first comment happened about the batter's eye and how there's just a really hard time hitting and seeing and recognizing the ball in 2023 within playing in T-Mobile Park. Now, the most recent comment is about the team success, less about his own success and how he kind of on this Dodgers team had a pretty solid career year playing around guys like Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman for an entire 162 MLB season. Like, yeah, that's going to have I think a lot of positive impact around you and a pretty solid winning, like a foundational winning mentality. The comment in this article from Teo goes as follows, quote, this is about the 2023 Seattle Mariners team. It was a really good, really talented team, Hernandez said, but we were missing something. And I think it was playing as one group, not individuals. Colton, I'm going to pass the baton to you and let you give your first thoughts on this.
I think it's overblown. Personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, I don't think he's saying anything that we didn't already know. Like, everything, like, Teoscar Hernandez is a great dude. Like, one of my favorite players in baseball. He had a down year last year, and that's not uncommon for players coming to Seattle. And I think that, I mean, even the whole batter's eye thing, like that was new information that we never heard. Like the batter's eye is kind of weird, but it does make sense. And maybe there's something credible to that. I don't know. This thing, I don't see anything wrong with it. Yeah, we were missing something, and I think it was playing as one group, not individuals. You could definitely see that last year. You could see, or I guess 2023 now, not last year. You could see guys going up to bat and literally just looking like they were trying to stat pad and like play for themselves and playing for the big hit when all they needed was a single. When all you needed to do was keep the line moving. That's completely true what he had to say. And there's so many, I guess, ways to look at it, and we'll talk about one of them here in a little bit, but that one being the possibility of needing some sort of veteran presence. And I don't want to get too far into it because we're going to talk about that with Justin Turner, but that's something that I think makes sense for a team that is playing for themselves, like not trying to move the line along. I think that's exactly what Teo is saying, and I have nothing wrong with that. I look at Teoscar Hernandez and I say, yeah, there is something about Seattle that didn't work for him. And that is not uncommon for guys throughout the history of this team. A guy that stands out to me that came to Seattle, had a couple a down year or a couple of down years, and then went elsewhere and had just a great rest of his career is Adrian Beltre. A guy who he came to Seattle after being pretty good for the Dodgers, comes to Seattle, puts up like a 102 OPS plus over his time with Seattle over 3 or 4 years, and then goes on to have a literal Hall of Fame career. Like, it seems so similar to what we just saw with Teoscar Hernandez, albeit a more abbreviated stay with just a 1-year deal. But I don't know. I think that there was something wrong with the team in 2023 that carried over into 2024, whether that be Scott Service, Jared DeHart, not having the veteran leadership, what have you. And it really changed in 2024 when Dan Wilson got there, Edgar got there, and Justin Turner got there. And Randy, of course, and whatnot at the trade deadline, basically. So there's something to be said about the veteran leadership, whether that be from just leadership in general, whether that be from the manager, the hitting coach, a guy on the team, what have you. It was missing last year in 2023, and Teo obviously wasn't that guy, couldn't be that guy, and that's fine. Like not everybody can be the Justin Turners or the Carlos Santanas of the world, but it's something the Mariners, when you look at what was not on the team in 2023 in the beginning of 2024, that's the only thing that stands out to me. Is not having a veteran guy in that clubhouse every single day that has been there, done that. That's what that to me is what this means.
I think you laid out like with Carlos Santana really well. There's like we acquired him obviously because France had his wrist injury, and within 4 days the Mariners went on their historic 12-game win streak in 2022, where like that really like catapulted them. I don't think there was really that big moment in 2024 where it was like this like huge step forward, but I think it was more of like a gradual sense because in the beginning of 2024, obviously we had the 10-game lead. They lost it. You know, we don't need to pull up some a repressed memory about the 2024 Seattle Mariners already. Yeah, like we just kind of felt it within the roster makeup at the beginning of 2024. And part of it, I think as well, I'd say there were 2 guys in the 2024 offseason that were acquired that in the eyes and minds of the Mariners front office and coaching staff were filling that role. The issue was they weren't hitting their weight. They literally were not performing. Mitch Garver and Mitch Haniger, 2 veteran guys, one who's been a part of some winning teams. Mitch Haniger, a known clubhouse favorite in years prior, has been around the organization for a bit. Obviously, signed the deal with San Francisco, got him back in the Robbie Ray trade. Those guys were your least valuable players in 2024. Guys that you probably brought in. I mean, they talked about it a ton during the offseason. Like, we're really glad to get Mitch Haniger back. Like, it's an awesome, like, veteran clubhouse guy to have back. Of course, it sucks losing Robbie Ray, a guy that also was pegged as being a very big clubhouse leader. They bring in Garver and Haniger as, like, guys that, like, yeah, they make sense as being people that will probably have their voice resonate throughout a clubhouse. But it is kind of contingent on the fact that they're performing, and they just flat out weren't for basically the entire season. You saw some like flashes of it from Haniger, like where he went on his streak, I think at the beginning of the second half, where like he was like, whoa, second half of Haniger, is he gonna go crazy? And then falls off the table again. Garver, I mean, did we ever see any stretch of it really in 2024?
There was like a couple games at a time, yeah.
Sure, but like it was never sustained, and I think that is where maybe that lost a lot of steam for the original core for 2024, and why Justin Turner was actually such a huge addition outside of like him playing pretty decently, and two, just like what he brings as a guy that's had a illustrious like 12-15 year career being a part of those winning Dodgers teams for the majority of it. Like he has been a part of winning teams forever. And not having that in 2023, like you think about like where the roster went, like they did not re-sign Carlos Santana. They lost Mitch Haniger that same offseason. A lot of those guys that probably can step into that veteran role now that are within the team probably weren't fully ready for it in 2023. I think of Cal Raleigh, who his voice will be louder in 2025 than it was in 2023. JP Crawford, although coming off a down year, I think that voice is still going to be heard. Julio Rodriguez, I think is now, it's kind of like he's hardening and maturing. We've kind of seen it happen like slowly. He was what, 23 that year, 22 that year. Like he's still super young. Like to expect those guys to have the same impact as a veteran leader, like we're just like kind of like generalizing like Carlos Santana, Justin Turner, to that like lump sum of players, like having their voice equal to what theirs is as far as like kind of like being able to like rally a clubhouse and then say like, guys, we've been here before, like blah blah blah, like whatever. It's kind of just hard to take a look at that 2023 roster and be like, yeah, they just, it's not hard, it's actually simple, they just didn't have that. And I think they need to have that kind of presence going forward, unless you're getting it out of the coaching staff, which it felt like maybe Scott and, you know, talking about Jared DeHart kind of had lost that momentum that they had with that core group. And that's probably where you lost a lot of that kind of like cohesion within the clubhouse, and why you probably need a veteran leader. But with Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez, maybe it's not as much of a pressing issue, but I'd still would prefer if they had someone in 2025.
I think that team chemistry is something that's so underrated in baseball. Like we have seen teams that have, I think back to like some of the Padres teams, or even back like way back, Joe, like the Marlins, Josh Johnson, who else was on that team back then? Like they just built like a super team for like a half a season and then traded all of them away.
Oh, yes.
And like Jose Reyes, I think, was on that team at the time. And yeah, it's like they have no team cohesion, no team chemistry, and the team sucks. There is a lot to be said about the intangibles of a baseball team, of guys that you are literally in there every single day with, trying to get the job done, which obviously the ultimate goal is winning the World Series. And if all the guys are not pulling the rope the same direction and playing for each other and not just for themselves, it's never going to work out. I think that's exactly what Teo was talking about here. And one of the guys we've mentioned, a guy who I think really exemplifies that in the best possible way, is Justin Turner. He came over here. He was great for the Mariners, had a 128 OPS plus for the Mariners, the highest since 2020 for him. Obviously only over, like 48 games. But I look to a guy like Justin Turner, and it seems like he likes Seattle, Joe. There was a picture that you sent me yesterday. Was it him that posted it?
He posted it on Instagram, and then Megan Corcoran posted it on Twitter, like screenshotted it and said like, hey, not to, get the, not to stir the pot, get the rumor mill going. However, this seems
Megan's awesome, by the way.
No, like great.
Megan's so cool.
It's funny that like we're in this state of the off season, because it's technically not over. We're like, here's Instagram stories. Like here's JD Martinez in Seattle from last year. It's like, what things can we latch onto? And as insignificant as some of these things might be, I don't view this as entirely insignificant. I do think there's probably some legs here, and it could be copium. It could be just me trying to grasp at straws that maybe don't exist. But I think a reunion for Turner and just a 1-year deal does make a lot of sense, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the clubhouse. I think it makes a lot of sense for the coaching staff, where it's, yes, a coaching staff like where Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez were brought in, seemed to resonate with the guys really well early on, but having another guy that can like kind of echo what they're saying, who is that veteran leader, I think would pay dividends, do very well for the coaching staff going forward. Of like, yeah, they're probably not the most decorated of like Dan Wilson's, this is his first time being a manager. Obviously, he doesn't have any prior experience really. Now, being able to latch on to some of the guys within the clubhouse that like respect him as a player, but also as a manager and who he's meant to the Mariners organization, I think that having a guy like Justin Turner, who was with him last year, makes a lot of sense coming back.
I think that Turner said it best towards the end of the season when he was being interviewed. Like, he said that he plans to play A guy who he'll be 40 in like less than a month. Like he ain't young, but clearly he can still get the job done. He's a pure hitter. He said that they're like maybe he'll be back next year. He left the door open for that, and I think that the Mariners should be more than open to that, because when it comes to guys at first base DH, like who's out there to go get? Like, don't get me wrong, you could go get Pete Alonso. The Mariners aren't going to spend that kind of money.
You can go get Christian Walker. They're not going to spend that kind of money.
Yeah. So spending money on a guy like Justin Turner, who we think will command, $7-8 million. Put him at first base, veteran leader. He's not like the best first baseman in the world, but you put him over there, Luke Raley as well. Like they can switch off days, DHing, maybe play some strong side platoons here and there. Like I think that there's real merit to that, to bring back a guy who's already well respected in that clubhouse with a lot of the guys that are on this team, and then focus your efforts on second base and third base the rest of this offseason. I think that bringing back Justin Turner makes the most sense for what the Mariners should do for this infield, and I think that is simply because all the guys there seem to like him. Like, and Julio, it just seems like Julio needs that mentor, that he needs that guy. Like, obviously it was Santana in 22, didn't really have it in 23, and then once Turner got here in 24, it seemed like Julio latched onto him immediately. And first of all, I want to say that's a very good sign that Julio is so drawn to these guys, these veteran leaders, because hopefully that is what Julio can grow into, is a guy like that. But secondly, I think that it just goes to show how important a stabilizing force like that is in a lineup day in and day out. And if Justin Turner's that guy, like both Santana and Turner are free agents this offseason. The Mariners could have either. Both fill a very similar role. I don't want to say they're interchangeable, because I'm sure each guy brings their own merits to the clubhouse, but Turner's the guy that most of these guys are familiar with. Like, a lot of the people from 22 are gone now. Like, off topic here, but Joe and I were talking about the 14-game winning streak. The first game of that winning streak, the Mariners won 2-1 over the Athletics, with runs driven in by Justin Upton and Abraham Toro. So
gross.
Yeah. Everyone's gone. Like, the fact that team went to the playoffs is crazy. Nonetheless, though, I think that more people are familiar with Turner. I just think that he's the right guy to bring back in this situation.
Another aspect of it that I think has me just gravitating towards either Turner or Santana. I do agree that they're pretty interchangeable. I think that cost very similar amounts of money, as far as it's a 1-year deal, anywhere probably between like 5 and 8 million. And if you go on the lower side, you're giving them some sort of like incentives on games played or whatever. Starts in the field versus starts at DH. What I think it does is it raises the floor of the infield as a whole. You are no longer relying on Dylan Moore to be your backup first baseman. If you go out there and get someone this offseason that is you said it like as well, like a stabilizing force, not only as a bat in a lineup, but like as a person in the field. Dylan Moore is great to some, maybe not to Colton. But like, dude can play around the diamond, like with the best of them. Like, got nominated for the utility man for a Gold Glove for a reason. I don't think he's like as bad as maybe I like to think he is at first base. However, seeing him play first base when we know what the options are outside of him sometimes hurts my heart. It was the same thing when like Sam Haggerty was getting starts at first base. I think, was that in 22 or was that was probably in 23. It was just an awful time. Getting someone there to be the like person that is probably starting over Luke Raley. Realistically, if you get a Justin Turner, you get a Carlos Santana, yes, they can DH a decent amount, but also if you get them, that allows Luke Raley to go out and play probably left field, and then Randy can DH. Julio gets a DH day. Like, things can work interchangeably. Luke Raley can DH. Like, there's a lot of things that kind of fall into place after getting this like first base DH raise the floor type of player, because then it also means you're probably not rostering Tyler Locklear, giving him more time to develop, or if you really want to, using him as a trade chip. Like, there's definitely ways that this offseason can play out if like it opens up like a completely new set of like paths. I think if you sign this Justin Turner, Carlos Santana type player, it opens up a lot of different avenues. Ones that may not be like as lucrative as we want them to be, like if we're signing Christian Walker or Pete Alonso, because obviously that's probably the more ideal situation, because you know what you're going to get out of them more consistently compared to you're signing a 40-year-old. Yes, there's probably some legitimate concern about how much Turner will regress or has the potential to regress, but he hasn't in his age 38 or 39 seasons necessarily. It hasn't been like this huge, tremendous drop off that maybe a lot of people were predicting after he left Los Angeles. He still continued to hit about as pure hitter as you can get, just as like far as like approach at the plate. Like, I'm very, very okay with bringing Justin Turner back for a 1 year, like you're saying, $7 million deal.
The problem will be what they do at the other positions if
Mhm.
they do that. Like if they bring back Justin Turner, sure. We've been watching the World Series, obviously, and as of the time you're hearing this, it may be over. Like full disclosure, we're recording this on the 30th in the morning.
Mhm.
The Dodgers are up 3-1 in that series. And it's been talked about a lot when you look at the payroll of the Dodgers and the Yankees. This was like Rob Manfred's wet dream, right? That's like two of the top five payrolls in the World Series. The two, MVPs of each league, both huge money makers in Judge and Ohtani. Neither has performed, but they're there.
Mhm.
Two very storied franchises with storied rivalries as well. So a lot of narratives to be filled here, but the biggest one, in my opinion, is the payroll. And you see, we're looking at Spotrac here. The Yankees had a payroll of 309 million, and the Dodgers had a payroll of 241 million. How does that? It's been talked about a lot because how could it not? But in regards to the Seattle Mariners, and I think Marine Layers laid this out best. Like 20 of the 24 like World Series teams over this century have been top 10 in payroll, like team
Yeah.
winners or whatever. I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's a very clear path to spending money equaling championships. Now, it's not always the case. Let me put that out there. Like the Mets, for example, payroll this year 317 million. Like it does not correlate always, but the Mets almost made the World Series as well. So
Mhm.
Mariners never come close.
Yeah.
And we know that their payroll is probably starting at around 140 million next year. And I think everyone's pretty much agreed that it'll be around 155 to 160 million next year. So the Mariners have 15 to 20 million dollars to play with. And that's a problem, Joe. And if you use $7 or $8 million to go out there and sign Justin Turner, you're already cutting into that. So how do you work around that at this point? I'm not really sure.
It's going to take a lot of creative trades or some sort of like really big year out of someone already on the roster. Like, I think if we get a normal Julio year, obviously this was a down Julio year compared to the previous two. If we get 2023 Julio, I honestly think this team's probably in the postseason.
Yeah.
Like, it's just kind of where it's at. Like, or even JP Crawford. JP's
yeah.
probably the larger gap between what he did in 2023 compared to 2024, right? Like, there's definitely guys, and that is also a conversation talking piece that has been exhausted at this point of like, well, if we had the guys that would have played their best year, like, yeah, of course you could say that about any team. You could say, well, the Rockies would have made the
He
playoffs
says the same thing
if they got prime Chris Bryant and prime Charlie Blackmon back. Like, they could have made the postseason. Yeah, there's a lot of like ifs, ands, and buts and like what ifs, but whoa, that was a lot right there. That was crazy. A lot of butts.
Big fan.
The $7 million, we'll call it fair at $7 million. If it is only $15 million that you're playing with this offseason, you are spending half of it on Justin Turner as far as actual free agent spending. And that doesn't include like money that you'll take on through trades. Getting to this 180, $200 million threshold, one, it's not unrealistic given how expensive players can be. Truthfully, it's just not. But also, like, you see what benefit it brings. Like, it's very clear. We trash on the Rangers for, you bought a World Series. They at least got one. And sure, their like path may not be sustainable. At least they have a path. At least they've got there. The Mariners made the playoffs once. Missed the playoffs. We better hope and pray that the next 5 years they make the playoffs 3 out of the 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have to be, like, consistent. I mean, sure, and they have been consistently there. They've been knocking on the door. They just keep, like, getting bounced out the club right before they can walk in. They're like, no, sorry, you don't get in, buddy. Who do you know here? No one? Cool, get out. Like, they need to, I think if they just up the payroll, like, if we got to, like, 170, I still think that could make a world of difference as well. Because that one just adds on one more player to raise the floor either offensively or in the bullpen. Like, you're not going to sign a starting pitcher unless it's, like, a bounce back kind of candidate that you can stash in AAA or stash in the bullpen that can be used as a spot starter later. Like, there's a lot of, like, weird moving parts here, but, like, I look at the Dodgers payroll, and that 241 feels very misleading because of
Yeah.
how big Otani's contract is and how much is deferred. So I get why it is at 241 million. It's still almost 100 million more than Seattle's, and that's with missing what, 69 of Shohei's 70 million per year. Nice.
68, but I like where you were going because he's getting paid $2 million a year.
Oh, is he? I thought it was only one.
Yeah, no. I mean, I prefer yours because 69 is the funny number.
It is the funny number. Shame. Well, regardless, with those figures, that would put them over 300 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, looking at the Yankees, over 300 million, Dodgers over 300 million, I don't think that's realistic. Like, one, spending that much money, that's just like, you're just burning money at that point. You are literally just throwing it into the fire. It's like this, like, checks and balances, like this, like, balancing act of, like, where you need to spend money, but, like, how much you should spend. Like, you mentioned the Mets, they missed the playoffs last year with over $300 million payroll. They made it this year and also made the World Series. Like, I think if they got to, like, 170, 180, 100, like, anywhere in that range, it doesn't even have to be at 200. I think that they would have been in the postseason last year. They would have been in the postseason this year. I think they'd be in the postseason next year, like, very, very consistently, and probably would have been a threat to make a deep run because of how deep the pitching has been the last 2 years.
Let's put it this way. In 2024, the Seattle Mariners were ranked 16th in payroll in the MLB, just ahead of the Colorado Rockies at 147 million, so less than $1 million more.
Well,
they spent less than $1 million more in the Rockies, and then 18th is the Chicago White Sox.
I don't know if either of those franchises are good litmus tests because they're really dumb.
They are really dumb, but so are the Seattle Mariners.
Fair.
From an ownership standpoint, the Mariners are one of the dumbest baseball teams.
That's fair.
It's just a fact. Like, you look at, we've talked about $180 million being like this is where you need to get to. That doesn't even put the Mariners in the top 10. That puts them at 12th last year, ahead of the Cardinals, behind the Red Sox. Like, the Mariners are a mid-market team. You're still mid-market if you're 12th. You're still in the middle 10. Mm-hmm. Why do we need to play, like, bottom half of the middle 10? It doesn't make sense. Like, the Seattle Mariners, and don't let people tell you that, there needs to be a salary cap because all these teams are buying World Series. Good for them. The ultimate goal is to win the World Series. All these teams can afford it. Even the Athletics. John Fisher can afford to go out there and spend the money on these free agents. He chooses not to. These guys are billionaires. How much the Shohei Ohtani contract, I guarantee, has made the Dodgers more than $2 million this year. I promise you.
Oh yeah.
Like, not a doubt in my mind, the Dodgers have made more money this year than they're paying Shohei Ohtani.
Oh,
and
very
it's like,
easily.
How do you put butts in the seats? You win baseball games. The Seattle Mariners had, like, what was it, like their second highest attendance since, like, 2004 this year?
Something like that.
Because people believe in this baseball team. They thought that this was going to be a good team, and they started the year hot. We're 10 games up in first place. Okay, and what happened? When they started to suck, people stopped showing up. I don't understand why people like John Stanton think that the best way to go about everything is spend just enough money to get people interested. Like, the profit margins for him are, I'm sure, great. But does he realize the profit margins? If you go on and win a World Series, if you go on and put a team out there that wins every single year and you create a dynasty, look at the Dodgers. They were terrible. I almost swore. They were terrible for like 10, 15 years until they were bought in their new ownership by, like, Magic Johnson. I don't remember who else is part of that ownership group, but, like, Magic Johnson's a part of it. I know that. And then they started spending money and they became good. It is so painfully obvious that is what the Mariners need. And you don't even have to go out there and spend $300 million. Like I said, get to 180. The offseason that Joe and I put together for $180 million in a recent video was awesome. Like, that team makes the playoffs 100%.
Yeah.
Like,
should the players perform?
Right. Yeah. That's obviously, always
the encompassing idea of, like, we sign Anthony Santander, he still comes in and hits 30 bombs, drives in over 100 RBI, and like hits 250.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we're doing our actual offseason plan where we're keeping ourselves to about 155.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard. And I have done some freaky stuff. Some weird.
Bro's getting freaky?
I'm getting freaky with it. Okay.
Freaks come out at night.
When we finally share that, probably later this week or next week, and we create this video about our 2025 team, the hoops that I had to jump through, I can't speak for Joe, but the hoops that I had to jump through to get this stupid baseball team to, like, for me to feel comfortable about them being competitive in 2025, it's like, it feels so unattainable with the restrictions that are put on this team by ownership that it feels like every year, what's the point? What are we doing? Like, oh, we might make the playoffs. No, at this point, we deserve to know that we are going to make the playoffs every single year, like the Dodgers, like the Yankees. They know every single year they're going to have a chance at this thing. And as a fan base, I mean, don't get me wrong. We've seen Yankees fans be like, oh, nobody has suffered more than the Yankees fans. We waited 15 years just to get swept. Shut up.
I mean, we were closer than the Yankees were last year.
That's true. That's a good point, actually.
They also had a lot of injuries, and they only had Aaron Judge. They had not yet, had Juan Soto, which is a pretty big contributing factor to them being the 1 seed in the American League and making it to the World Series.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just,
I get what you're saying. I wasn't trying to, like, diffuse your
argument.
No, yeah,
but, like, it's just so dumb, dude. I hate it here. I hate the scene, Joe. Can you say something? I'm down and out right now.
You hate this team, but you still want to support this team? What are you?
I do.
A bootlick?
I am. And for Halloween this year, I'm going as a Jerry DePoto bootlicker. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 135 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, presented by Bet Online, the Freddy Krueger episode of the podcast, and go Mariners.